Hello, we're delighted to welcome you to the first webinar co-organized by the French law firm Carbonnier, Lamaze, by Mazars and by Marcalliance, the international alliance gathering Mazars lawyers and independent law firm, which I have the honor to chair. The European Union has, over the last 30 years, adopted a very wide range of rules to fight money laundering. 6 directives have been implemented, including the last one, which adopted a more repressive approach, and which is yet to be transposed by the member states. However, the recent scandals involving European banks has actually shed light on the need to address structural weaknesses of the current supervisory system, especially the ability to effectively monitor relevant cross-border activities. This month, actually, ABN AMRO Bank announced that it would pay a fine of 480 million euros to end criminal proceedings for money laundering activities. This is the most recent case, but amongst others, unfortunately, in the recent years. In 2018, there was perhaps the largest money laundering scandal in the world, with approximately 200 billion euros of suspicious transactions that were preceded by the Danish bank Danske Bank. And the same year, ING was condemned to pay a 775 million euro fine further to the Panama Papers revelations. Europol estimate that about 1% of Europe's wealth is involved in suspicious financial activities, which represents an entire year of EU's GDP. The amount of proceeds of crimes recovered at European level as a result of successful money laundering prosecution represents at best around 1% of the total amounts laundered, which is unfortunately a dreadly figure. On 1.1 million of suspicious activity reports, only 10% have been investigated. And another interesting figure is that 90% of those filings are actually international, which shows the importance of European cooperation on those issues. Money laundering also greatly affects non-financial sectors. In fact, 50% of the laundered sums concern non-financial entities, and this is something we don't always bear in mind. However, in this matter, there is no European supervisor, there is no equivalent to the EBA. And this non-financial sector includes many actors, such as drug traffickers, casinos, real estate, law and accounting firm, I know there's many attending today, and the gambling sector. All this renders supervision more complex. In 2019, Mr. Valdis Dombrovskis, the Executive Vice President of the European Commission, stated that the European strict anti-money laundering rules are not applied in the same way in all banks and in all countries of the EU. At the time, he referred to structural problem in the Union's ability to prevent the financial system from being used for illegitimate purposes. This is a quote. So why has the EU not been more successful so far at fighting money laundering? The lack of effectiveness of the European anti-money laundering policies is partly due to inconsistency and non-harmonization of anti-money laundering rules between the member states. Those rules are defined by directives, and member states have a considerable margin of appreciation in their implementation, which explains the great disparities between the legislations. So we end up with a rather fragmented legislative landscape across the EU, which creates additional costs and burdens for those providing cross-border activities, which also causes regulatory shopping, with businesses registering where the rules are more relaxed than in other countries. There is also a multiplicity of controlling entities. We have national financial intelligence units in each country. We have law enforcement bodies and non-financial supervisors. So in total, this represents over 100 entities across the EU. and these are having trouble cooperating at their own level, but also with the European authorities. In the light of those weaknesses, the European Commission has adopted an action plan last May, which was approved both by the European Parliament and by the Council. And two key measures are currently considered at the European level to solve those issues. The first one is the adoption of harmonized regulation. And the second is the creation of a single European authority. And the Commission's work on the preparation of the legislative proposal is at a late stage at the moment. We are very honored that Mrs. Raluca Pruna, head of the Financial Crime Unit at the European Commission, has accepted to intervene at this webinar today. Mrs. Pruna has been working with the European institutions for almost 14 years, both at the Parliament and at the Commission, where she has held, amongst others, several head of unit positions. She became Minister of Justice of Romania end of 2015 to early 2017, before returning at the European Commission as head of the Financial Crime Unit. Mrs. Pruna aims to shift the European Union's approach to money laundering from being a country-by-country basis to a centralized force. This webinar will be moderated by my two colleagues, Alice Noisé. Alice is a specialist in financial investigation and financial litigation, and she co-heads the Forensic Investigation Services team at Mazars France. And Emmanuel Bismuth. Emmanuel is a partner in my law firm, Carbonnier, Lamaze, Rasle, and practices finance and banking law. Regarding logistics, let me just tell you that there will be a Q&A session at the end, so please feel free to ask your questions on the chat box, and Alice will take them and ask them to Mrs. Pruna. I will now pass the floor to Alice Noisé. Thank you.
Thank you, Dorothée. But the first part of this webinar will be for Mrs. Pruna to let us know more about her job at the European Commission and the action plan, where it stands right now, and what are the main goals you want to achieve with your team.
Thank you very much for the kind invitation to attend this webinar. It's an honor for me to address an audience of lawyers in general, if I understand correctly. I have a legal training. I'm a lawyer by training myself. So the work that the European Commission is doing in this field, in the field of anti-money laundering and countering terrorism, the financing of terrorism, is now indeed at the crossroad. As Ms. de Bernis said, we have a long history in the Union. In the sense that indeed we have a sequence ever since the 90s, 1990, we have a sequence of 6 directives that brought our legal framework in the Union to be solid. But as we know, and as Ms. de Bernis mentioned, it was the case that we had to update this legal framework. For instance, the 5th anti-money laundering, it was tabled soon after the terror attacks in Paris in November 2015. Then we had a number of banks being in difficult situations, and the Commission adopted in July 2019 a package, an AML package, comprising several reports, but for the interest of this webinar today, the most relevant report was the so-called post-mortem report, giving an update, or let's say snapshot of what the situation is. So on the basis of this, it was very natural that fighting money laundering became a top political priority for the current Commission. And in May last year, the Commission adopted an action plan which set, the milestones for what needs to be achieved in order to have a comprehensive Union policy in this field. We are of the view in the Commission that the action plan is an ambitious one. It's a multifaceted one addressing all angles of what anti-money laundering and countering financing of terrorism is. It builds along 6 pillars that are mentioned here. First of all, a better implementation of rules as they are, because as we know, we can have very good laws on paper, but unless they're enforced, they serve for little purpose. Second of all, we have learned our lessons, and we have seen that having a series of directives that need to be transposed by member states in their internal legal order led to fragmentation in the union. So we thought that the Commission announced that now it's time to move towards a more harmonized set of rules, to a single rule book in which rules that are have the merit that could be harmonized in the framework of a regulation should be moved into the first AML regulation. A third pillar concerns supervision and the creation of a EU level supervisor. Fourthly, the coordination and support mechanism for financial intelligence units. Then the fifth pillar on law enforcement and information sharing. And here, because we heard from stakeholders, it is important. I mean, this is the preventative side of fighting money laundering, but at the end of the day, just to for the loop to be complete, the law enforcement side needs also being enforced. And here, there is a lot of work being done also in cooperation with other services of the Commission, not only in DG FISMA. And last but not least, the sixth pillar is on international aspects of AML CFT in the Union and strengthening the role of the EU at a global level. So this is, if you want, our main policy document in the Commission. And since May, if you could go to the next slide, please. The agenda in the Commission is built around adopting the measures already announced in great detail in the action plan. As I said, it's a top political priority in the Commission to achieve a comprehensive policy in this field. And we the Commission works against the background of a very strong political mandate received by both co-legislators in the Union. So we have positions of member states expressed through 2 sets of Council conclusions in December 2019 and in November 2020. We have several positions in favor of strengthening the AML CFT policy in the Union expressed by the European Parliament, the last of which is the resolution of July 2020. So on the basis of all this, I mean, against the background of this strong political mandate, with all institutional actors at Union level aligned, with also a strong call from stakeholders, from those to which the AML CFT policy is addressed, we have prepared the way to deliver on these measures, on the action plan. We had an extensive public consultation last year. On the same day when the action plan was adopted, a public consultation was launched. It was tailor-made to national competent authorities, but also to the public at large, to professionals, with a view to inform the debate before tabling proposals. We had, as for all proposals, adopted for all draft law, if I may say so, adopted by the College of Commissioners. We had an impact assessment which was completed last year, and now we are in the final stages of finalizing this package, reflecting, again, based on a political mandate which was very clear on the need to address gaps in our legal and institutional framework, and on the basis of what we heard in the public consultation. And in the next slide, because I wanted my presentation to be short to allow for questions from the floor. The main axes of reform, obviously, they're announced in the action plan. So the main axis of reform will be focused on the rules, on the single rule book. So we'll have in the package the first AML regulation and a new AML directive with provisions that are not mature enough at this stage to be put into a regulation which is directly applicable in all member states. The package will also address supervision through establishing an authority, an EU supervisor. Just for now, I would just want to say that, as you rightly pointed, Ms. de Bernis, the first focus will be on the financial institutions, but we have to also take account that the DNFBPs, the designated non-financial businesses and professional lawyers, accountants, notaries, they have to also be supervised, and we have seen many models in many member states. But here it's a bit different from the financial sector, so we only speak about an oversight and coordination powers over the non-financial sector, which in general is self-regulated. And last but not least, the forthcoming package will also set up a mechanism to coordinate and support the work of the financial intelligence units in the EU, in member states. The mechanism is intended to fully integrate, along with the supervisor, the AML authority, and it is mainly aimed to provide support and assistance to joint financial analysis by FIUs, because as we know, criminals are unfortunately always are ahead of regulators, and as crime is increasingly more of a cross-border nature, so should be our response and the work of FIUs. Next slide, I think it's the last one. I've inserted there more info. So this is what we do in the financial crime unit in DG FISMA. We also so we are in charge of the preventative legislation, as I tried to explain. There are many other aspects of how to bring all this policy together. There are many actions taken by other services, initiated by other services of the Commission, but I would stop here for now, and I'm very happy to reply to your questions. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So for the next part, we will focus on two of the pillars you have just presented. The first one is about the harmonization of the rules within Europe, and then we'll talk more about the new supervision authority. Emmanuel.
Sorry. Hello, thank you for your presentation. It was very interesting. So the first question will be, why is such an harmonization so important?
Well, it is important because what we have seen with the challenging process for member states to transpose the 4th and the 5th directives, we have seen that when transposing a directive, the result was often fragmentation in the internal market. So directive could be gold-plated, as we say, and member states could go beyond the minimum level of harmonization provided in such an instrument. And the end result was that there was fragmentation at union level. So the merit of harmonization, just following as well, for instance, the legal framework in other fields in financial services, for instance, in the field of prudential supervision, we thought now, and we have seen, I mean, we have arguments to plead for a case in which time is now good to provide rules that are in a regulation, which is to say they would be directly applicable in all member states. And with this, we hope to put to an end or to reduce to the extent possible the current fragmentation in transposing rules at the national level.
Thank you. The next question is, what is the status of the project of the EU Single Rulebook?
Here, I try to explain that, in fact, what we're doing now is not to reinvent everything. So I should have said from the very beginning that even before this reform, it was the case that the Union had one of the most advanced legal and institutional frameworks in the world. But the merit of having a EU single rule book is to have, again, following on precedents in financial services, in other legislation in financial services in a larger sense. The purpose is to have a set of instruments, one which is directly applicable, and there just to briefly mention what will be in the regulation. We will have, for instance, all rules that will be addressed to the obliged entities in the regulation. So all the rules on CDD, on customers' due diligence, on how to identify the beneficial ownership information, everything concerning obliged entities throughout the Union will be regulated, roughly speaking, in a regulation. However, we will have a directive where we will leave some of the provisions that cannot be harmonized. And why is that? Because it is for member states to adopt some measures that will facilitate the effective enforcement of rules. This will still be in a directive. So the current status is that we will replace the 5th AMLD with a couple of instruments, a regulation, the first AML regulation, and the new AML directive.
Thank you. And what are the main difficulties on drafting this rule book?
Well, first of all, the main difficulty was to really do a correct mapping of because we speak of fragmentation, but when you have to when colleagues had to start doing the legal drafting based on all information that we had from member states, from stakeholders, the private sector, one of the biggest challenge was to correctly map what is the situation, what exactly this fragmentation means. And for instance, we have seen that in some member states, while the directive, I mean, the currently applicable rule book, the 5th AMLD, it defines what the obliged entities are, but it left, for instance, the opportunity, the possibility for member states to go beyond and to include in this list of obliged entities additional entities. And this is, for instance, an example of fragmentation, because it happened that in some member states you would have an entity which was considered an obliged entity, which was not the case in another member state. And this is I would say, mapping correctly the situation was one of the main difficulty in drafting the rule book. Another difficulty was to draft a regulation while taking into account that what we provide in the field of AML CFT, for instance, customers due diligence, it's not, as you know, a rule-based approach. So it would not be possible for us to have in a regulation a set of criteria that an obliged entity would follow, and at the end of this, tick the box process, one obliged entity could be assured that the CDD is properly done. And why is that? Because the CDD is done according to international standards of the Financial Action Task Force that we have reflected in our regulation, like the entire FATF community. The ingredient here is the risk-based approach. And I'm mentioning this because this was also one of the challenges we had. So yes, we will have all this in a regulation, all new rules on customers due diligence. But again, we cannot challenge the basic principle of risk-based approach, which has to be applied by all obliged entities by transforming it in a rule-based approach. So I will stop here about in listing the challenges, but we overcome them, and the ambitious is to put on the table an ambitious proposal. Okay.
Can you tell us if this rulebook covers particular areas like cryptocurrencies or crowdfunding?
About the cryptocurrencies, it was already the case with the 5th AMLD that they were standards, the latest standards at the time of the Financial Action Task Force were included in part in our legislation, and now we are further aligning and including in our regulation all updated standards when it comes to crypto assets. So the reply is yes. On crowdfunding, I mean, I'm not now in the position of entering into details. You know that there is a special European regime for some crowdfunding service providers, and obviously this we will distinguish in our forthcoming legislation between these two regimes. So those that are already well regulated and that comes with safeguards will be treated in a distinct way than the rest of them. But for now, it suffices to say that the European Commission identified in its biannual supranational risk assessment crowdfunding platforms as bearing a risk of money laundering and terrorist financing. And by saying this, I'm just saying that they come with a risk, not that they're exposed to the risk. That not that all crowdfunding platforms and service providers could work towards misusing this innovative means towards money laundering and terrorist financing. So yes, crowdfunding will be there, but with a distinct regime depending on the type.
Okay, 2 more questions about that. In this respect, do you believe that member states are reluctant to apply AMLFT rules as it weakens their attractivity to innovative businesses?
My reply is no. We are of the view that member states, when they had to transpose over a very short period of time a number of instruments, the 4th AMLD and the 5th AMLD, it was challenging, but I would not say, certainly not, that they are reluctant to apply AML CFT rules. And then when it comes to innovative businesses, fintech, cryptocurrencies, you know that the Commission recently adopted a strategy on the digital financing. And obviously AML, while defenses on AML CFT should be there, one could not turn a blind eye to innovative businesses. And in this respect, the forthcoming proposals will also reply to these concerns, and we hope that it will bring more clarity. Also, we are also following the work that is done, as you know, in the Financial Action Task Force. So the reply is no. I don't think that they're reluctant, but this is not an easy process. It comes with its challenges.
And last question, how do you plan to tackle money laundering on virtual transaction on virtual assets?
Here I will just say I've mentioned in my replies earlier that we want to also include, take the opportunity of legislating now of this legislative package to also reflect the latest work done in the framework of FATF, and the reply is yes. Virtual transactions and virtual assets, to put it very shortly, will be addressed in the forthcoming package, and this is just to include the latest developments in the standards in FATF, which is an obligation, in fact, for the entire global community. But I think that we'll be the first to do that because we have the opportunity of this package now.
Thank you for your answers, Alice.
Thank you.
Thank you. So for that part, we would like to know more about the new European authority that will be settled. I understand that we are just months before all the decisions are taken, but at this stage, what can you tell us about this authority? I understand from your first presentation that there is a consensus about the fact that it should have direct supervision on financial entities and non-direct over non-financial sector. Can you tell us more about this part?
Here, I would like to say that, it's a paradox that the closer we are on the date of adoption, which is in weeks from now, the less we can enter into the details, because I would not like, I'm not in the position to anticipate the decision of the Commission, of the College. But however, we are on the safe ground when it comes to what kind of a supervisor, because we have a very clear political, everything was already announced in the action plan. And then in the Council conclusions of the last round of Council conclusions in November 2020, member states in the Council, they require, there is a call to have a European supervisor. So this was a non-controversial issue. And from this, and there is also language in the Council conclusions of November 2020 asking, a supervisor to have a direct supervisory power over the financial sector. Yes, this is something that I said I can confirm. Now it will also have to be seen. Here we don't speak of, we're not working on, let's say, on uncharted territory. We have the previous example of the SSM in the field of prudential supervision, and we took a large inspiration of how this system works. When it comes to the non-financial sector, here things are a bit more difficult, and you as lawyers are very well placed to know that many of these professions are self-regulated. So we thought that it's not appropriate to have a layer at union level which would directly supervise a myriad of such non-financial entities in the union, but it's more appropriate for the future union supervisor to be a body that will have an oversight, an indirect, supervisory power, but an oversight, and to the extent to which, for instance, we're not saying that nothing is done in terms of supervision of the non-financial sector. We're just, we have seen when mapping what the situation is, we have seen that there are many models, and some of them could be disseminated as very good practices. So the forthcoming package will take account of this, but as you said, we cannot, as regulators, we could not turn a blind eye. Yes, banks, they were in the front line, unfortunately, of headlines in the union lately, but as Dorothée de Berny said before, more than 0.5% of money laundering takes place outside the financial sector.
If we focus on the financial sector, in which type of situations do you expect this new authority will have to act?
Well, thank you for this question, because this will allow me to say that the intention of the Commission is not to replace the national supervisors. So the intention is to create a layer of supervision at union level that is working closely with national supervisors while exerting, direct competence, supervisory competence over a limited set of institutions in the financial sector. And here it will have to, without, I'm not in the position to enter into too many details, but based on a criteria that will be very well defined in the regulation, a selection will be done just to identify the financial institutions, institutions that will fall under the direct supervisory power of the EU supervisor. And as you can imagine, unlike for prudential, because this was also in the debate a very vivid discussion, unlike in prudential supervision, here, it's the haystack and the needle. AML is in the needle. So perhaps the main criteria, without prejudging, will be a part size, a cross-border activity, just to narrow a bit. the most important criterion will be linked to the risk of the institution, of the said financial institution, and this will be reflected in the proposal. So this is all I can share now.
So I had a question, but I don't know if you can tell about that. Is the dialogue with outside Europe authority, like the US or the Chinese ones, on money laundering? Will this European authority have a role in that international discussion?
Well, yes, this is a very important question, because indeed our ambition for now is to move towards a comprehensive policy to strengthen our AML CFT defenses. But as I said, the crime is of cross-border nature, and as it does not stop at the borders of member states, it does not stop at the borders of the Union. So yes, the proposal will include legal language, if I'm allowed to say so, on cooperation. Cooperation not only within the Union with different bodies, but also cooperation with the peer institutions outside the Union. So the reply is yes. You will see this in the proposal. So cooperation with the supervisory structures outside the Union, especially when it comes to our partners, the most important partners of the Union. Yes, this is carefully taken care of in the proposal.
You mentioned in your presentation the FIU, the Financial Intelligence Units, that are the various national units that are collecting suspicious transactions and suspicious reports. So I understand it will now be under the supervision of this new authority with a European approach.
No, supervision is not the right term here. I mean, as you know, it stems from international standards of the Financial Action Task Force, that financial intelligence units they need to enjoy independence and autonomy. Okay. And this is why, for instance, in member states, even where the FIU is placed, in some member states it's an administrative body. In a couple of them, it functions in the prosecution offices. In many others, it's established at the level of the police. So this is not to be challenged at all, but this is making even more difficult. I mean, the intention is not to supervise FIUs, but to offer to them a mechanism where they can cooperate. And I will give you an example that we often give in our discussions. It may seem trivial, but for instance, the templates that they use for STRs, they're different in different member states. And be this alone, again, it may seem trivial, but this is, you know, impeding a very smooth cooperation between FIUs. But what's more important is that this mechanism will try to establish a framework in which there will be an effective, timely and effective exchange of information among FIUs in the Union, with a view to develop joint analysis, because that many of the STRs in our discussions with FIUs, crime is of cross-border nature, then also an STR often is of interest for many member states. So then to allow a joint financial analysis to be done by FIUs, we think that here is where the mechanism can provide added value. But we don't speak at all about a supervision of FIUs. So
I get it.
This would be against standards.
Yes. Okay. And does this mechanism consider to create a data pool where the various reports could be gathered, so to organize the sharing of the information?
Yes, in fact, we have such a tool for exchanging information, which is called the FiUNet. And this tool is now, I mean, you may see in the action plan, it was hosted by Europol. And then further to a decision of the European Data Protection Supervisor, it was considered that Europol cannot host it any longer because of a problem in their legal basis. Europol, because if I speak about a transaction which is suspicious, it has nothing to say in a first stage about a person being a suspect in the sense of the criminal law. And without entering into the details, there was a decision of the European Data Protection Supervisor that this FiUNet should be moved, cannot be hosted any longer by Europol. And this is another stream of work that we are working on. The FiUNet will be temporarily hosted by the Commission with a view to have it once the authority, the AML authority, is established, without prejudging again the adoption, the negotiations, legislative negotiations. If we get there, the FiUNet, which is already up and running, but has to be kept like any IT system up to, I mean, updated and maintained. This is existing, and it's the main, at union level, the main means of exchanging information between FIUs. So this is also taken care of.
Thank you. Before I let Emmanuel ask more questions, I will just remind the audience that you can ask questions in the chat. There is a questions part on the right of your screen, and so don't hesitate to ask questions, and I will share them with Mrs. Pruna at the end of the webinar. Emmanuel.
Thank you, Alice. So next part will be about the COVID. We cannot avoid it. So it's been more than a year now that we are in this COVID crisis. Has it modified your approach on AML, and have you identified new areas of risk?
Well, it's a bit, I mean, here I will share with you information that we're having from member states, because as we speak now at union level, we do not have nor the competence nor the ability to identify such trends. But soon after we walked down that path with the pandemic, we had numerous discussions with the financial intelligence units, with FIUs in the member states, and we have seen that, well, not surprisingly, but that they experienced in different member states the similar typology. So just to give you an example, in June last year, the main challenge for many FIUs was the fraud to access some kind of state aid schemes related to the pandemic, or related to imports of medical devices which were either not up to the standards in a union or defective. So there is a common typology and common trends that have to be identified. Whether this will be, I mean, I don't want to fall back in any question that I'm asking to fall back on the package, but fact is that this is also what the mechanism for cooperation and coordination of FIUs is aimed to do. I mean, to bring to provide a forum which is formalized for FIU to have a structured exchange of information, and to orient, you know, limited resources, because resources are limited everywhere, and the number of STRs ne fait que grimper, it's increasing and increasing. So how to better use this scarce resources to reply to common challenges. On the COVID, otherwise, I would not say that it changed, you know, the way that AML CFT policy is implemented at union level. I think that member states are better placed to be asked about this. But we have seen in reports, and we'll factor this in the forthcoming supranational risk assessment report. We have seen that you know, some sort of cyber crime, some sort of innovative products bear a risk which could be, this is still to be assessed, could be higher now during the pandemic that it used to be in the old normal, if you allow me to say so.
Thank you. I have one more question about the COVID that was given to us by Mr. François Faletti, the former prosecutor of the Paris Court of Appeal. And the question is, are preventive mechanisms being considered as part of the post-COVID recovery plan to ensure that no diversion to mafia or inappropriate activities takes place?
Well, here, you know that the recovery plans are discussed by competent authorities in member states with the Commission. DigiFISMA is not in the lead on that, but other services in the Commission. I take note of this question, and I will ask to come back on this. I'm not in the position to reply to this question now.
Okay, understood. Thank you very much. Alice, it's your turn again.
I would only say, if you allow me, that we have an institution at union level, the European Public Prosecutor's Office, and I know for a fact that France designated its delegated prosecutors there, and it's within the EPPO competence to look at any potential cases which are of criminal nature and are affecting the financial interests of the Union. And of course, at the Commission level, there is Olaf in charge of, competent to protect the financial interests of the Union. So, but this is a very general reply, and I'm certain that Monsieur le Procureur knows that. I will come back on the more details about the recovery plans.
Okay, thank you.
So few more questions of various areas. One is about the transparency standards that are very high in the money laundering policies, and how do articulate these requirements with other standards related to data protection, for instance?
You have said the most difficult question for among the last while. This is a recurrent discussion that we are having, and we heard from many stakeholders in the private sector, including when we discuss about the possibility of having private-public partnerships, or of pooling resources, banks pooling resources together to do their CDD. There is this apparent tension between AML rules and rules that are very advanced in the Union on data protection. But this being said, we have announced, the Commission has announced in the action plan that we'll look into clarifying this, how this articulation goes, while taking due account of the institutional arrangement in the Union. And it's not for the Commission to do that, but we'll have to turn to a distinct body, which is the EDPB, the European Data Protection Board, I think it is called, where all data protection supervisors in member states are sitting. So this is something that that is announced in the action plan, that we're considering that, and we will have to take a look at that. This being said, the rules on transparency, they featured already very, very high in the 5th AMLD. Member states, in the 4th and the 5th AMLD, member states have established, most of them, their registers on beneficial ownership. Now we also work on interconnecting these registers at Union level, and this work is ongoing. The Commission is also following very closely and trying to put, there is also a discussion at international level in the Financial Action Task Force about potential amendments to recommendations 24 and 25th. I think they are related to BO information. The Commission, I would like to say that along with member states, we're very active there, just to promote in an international forum as the FATF what we already have in our legislation, and which is also already very ambitious. And in the forthcoming package, we cannot add more to the rules that we had that are now in the current legal framework, but we're trying to clarify these rules because we have seen that when enforcing rules on how to determine BO according to the threshold in the directive. There were different understandings in different member states, and this is yet another example of fragmentation. So yes, we will still promote by clarifying the rules, transparency, and we will do so even outside the union in FATF.
Okay, thank you. Another question about the involvement of the private sector. We've talked about authority, national authorities, and what should be, in your opinion, the implication of the private sector, and especially of lawyers and accountants, that should be a large part of this audience.
The private sector was our main interlocutor. I speak now perhaps a bit more about the financial sector, but not only. They are our main interlocutors, because at the end of the day, we legislate, be it at national level or at union level, and those who have to apply this legislation are obliged entities, and they're all the private sector. So we had extensive discussions with the private sector, with banks through various, either directly with several banks, either through the European Banking Federation, for instance, or fora of banks, because we wanted to make certain that you know, before tabling a proposal, putting on the table of our political masters a proposal, we really hear, you know, what their concerns were, and they had also the opportunity to reply to the public consultation. And I cannot speak for the private sector, but I think that you know, that discussions that we're having with them, and the fact that we worked together throughout this period of time since May will be reflected in the fact that expectations and the challenges that they shared with us. Because you mentioned STRs earlier. If you speak to FIUs, they're telling you we're flooded by STRs, there are too many, we cannot cope any longer. If we speak to the private sector, they say, you know, we are just applying AML rules, and we send STRs, but often we don't hear back, so we do not know, are they of good quality, should we pursue on this? So this is something that is not new to us. But I mentioned only banks, and in fact, I don't want to forget that I'm addressing an audience of lawyers. Lawyers as well. We have a program that we're implementing with a European umbrella. I mean, the European Association of the Barreau and the law societies, just to share with the lawyers throughout the union what the rules on AML are. And here again, just to give, I gave an example from the financial sector, an example, perhaps the most relevant example from the non-financial sector, lawyers. Here again, we have reached the community in the union to be certain that rules are, everybody is aware, you know, even in a small town, somewhere at the margin of the union, every lawyer knows that he or she is an obliged entity, and there is a reporting obligation. And yes, I hope that this answers. And we have looked into not adding to the burden of the private sector. So we are of the view that the rules that we will table, that will clarify, will in fact mean less of a burden for the private sector when doing a proper CDD and properly implementing AML rules.
Okay. One last question. Are you planning to use innovative tools in your anti-money laundering policy at European level? Because there are innovative tools everywhere in the banking system, in the private sector, and how do you use those new innovations?
I mentioned before that there is also work done by other services in the Commission, but not only, including in my own DG, in DG FISMA. Other colleagues, other units were in charge of the strategy on digital financing, and the Commission announced there its agenda. So the reply is yes, of course. We have to take care of these innovative tools. And I would think, without seeing any merit in this pandemic, I think that, you know, the pandemic put us in a situation in which we had to acknowledge that we have to take steps for more digital onboarding, for instance, when we speak about banks, and even for lawyers. It might be the case, well, we hope that this is coming to an end, but the world is changing, and it was unavoidable for us in the forthcoming package not to take.
And so I would like to thank you very much, Mrs. Pruner, for your excellent contribution, and all the more because we imagine you're extremely busy in this period with finalizing the drafting of the regulation, which will be a huge amount of work. Thank you a lot also to Alice and Emmanuel for having moderated the webinar, and thank you all for having participated. We had the great pleasure of hosting more than 110 participants, so it's a great success. Thank you to all, and have an excellent day. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. It was a pleasure. Thank you all very much. Bye. Merci beaucoup.
Bye.
Merci.
Thank you.